Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Learning Network podcast. Today I'm joined by a very special guest, and I've had the pleasure of knowing Bel for quite some time now. I've worked with Bel in lots of different capacities over the last 15 or so years, and you've heard her official bio. Welcome to the podcast, Bel Harotounian.
Hi, thanks, Kell. I work in a comprehensive public high school in Western Sydney. In our classes, especially CAFS classes, we have a range of abilities. We don't tend to get that top end too often, but we're really working towards trying to get a few more of them in our classes. So we've got, your typical kind of kid, and have been teaching CAFS at this school for almost 20 years now. And I love it. CAFS is my passion. It's my most favourite subject to teach. And yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for joining us, Bel. And I think there are many CAFS teachers out there who do have that full spectrum of CAFS students, kids that really struggle, kids that could possibly be on a life skills program, all the way up to some of our high achieving kids who possibly might have CAFS as their very favourite subject, their very first or best subject. And I think that wide spectrum is really something that I love, and I do miss that being in the classroom to not have and to see my kids blossom, sometimes struggling, struggling to put pen to paper, all the way up to really, follow me around the playground, trying to pick my brain about how they can improve. And I think today's podcast episode is all about us as teachers becoming marking ninjas. And I know that I've said this out loud for, quite a few times, that I love marking. Marking is my sweet spot. I know Bel loves giving her students feedback. And I think today we're going to get a great insight into what it's really like to, be in the classroom and giving our students valuable feedback about where they are, where they might need to be, and how we can really help them get there. So grab a pen and paper, because you're going to want to write some ideas down about how you can become a marking ninja. And look, as I mentioned before, Bel is super experienced, is going to shed some light on some tips for us to really become marking ninjas. So let's unpack your top 5 tips on how to become a marking ninja.
I guess the first thing that I would say to do is I always do some wide reading. So I like to have a look through the kids' responses before I try and put any marks to paper. So I think it's really important that we get an idea of how the students have answered that question before we really try and give them that specific feedback and give them an allocated mark. Like, it's really important that we see what they've given us to begin with. So that would be my number one, would be
well, what would that look like on the ground as a teacher? So would you grab like your whole big load of papers, or would you section it out and then do some wide reading?
Well, I guess it depends on how big your cohort is. So if you've got one class, I actually do look through the whole lot just to get an idea, and I don't go in with preconceived ideas of which are my top students, and like you've got that at the back of your mind, but you never know how that kid has answered that particular question at that point in time, especially if it's like an in-class assessment task, or you've given them here's an exam question, we're going to answer it today and go through, because you just don't know really what you're going to get. So it's a really good idea to have a look through and see what you do have before you start marking.
Yeah, some good tips there. All right, what about number 2?
Number 2 is, once you've done that, start putting them into piles. So look at your higher responses, your middle of the range responses, and then your lower responses as well. That way you have somewhere to go to. And I like to start with marking the bottom ones first, and I build up the picture from that way, build it up that way. Also, when you put them into those 3 piles, you can kind of have a look at like what a benchmark is. So you can pick a paper that goes, okay, so this one's definitely that 4 out of 8. So why is it a 4 out of 8? So you can go through the marking criteria and really line up, this is what this kid's done. These are the points in the marking criteria that they've met, and that's why it sits here. So anything better than that is obviously going to be bumped up into that next mark range, and you do that as you go for the 3 different piles.
So would that be like if you're at home doing this, would you spread them all out and kind of create those physical piles, or would you post-it note them? Or would you kind of flag them in some sort of way in those paper piles?
Me personally, I actually physically put them into 3 different piles. And then, sometimes as you start reading through, some of them may be in the wrong pile. And that's okay. Because you're just getting an idea to begin with, so that you have a starting point, so that you're not overwhelmed with your marking. So putting it off like, I've got this pile of marking I need to do. It's a lot easier, I find, to chunk it. And it's a lot easier to get your head around what's in front of you as well.
Yeah, cool. And so would you actually allocate, I know teachers, I've done it before, put my marking off, had it sitting in my study going, I put that marking to, I've got that massive pile still sitting there. And look, when I worked at Nagle College, we had up to 4 classes at one stage. We had a very big cohort, and it would sometimes be very overwhelming. So would you allocate yourself a day or set times to kind of smash it out, or would you kind of do it in like little bits at a time? What do you think is the best kind of way to get stuck into that marking if we've been avoiding it?
If they've been avoiding it, I'll probably do it in sections. I do best when I just knock it all out at once, but then it depends on what's going on at home too. So like I struggle, like I've got 4 little kids, so trying to knock out a whole day for it is very challenging. So I can't work like that, so I've had to adapt and adjust. So at the moment I do chunks, and I do it of an evening, so I couldn't get through a whole lot in one sitting.
So
you can change just whatever works for you.
That's right. I think adapting and changing to our experience, and as you become more confident, or even just our stage of life, things change. Probably back in the day in your 20s, you'd probably be able to smash out a whole bit of marking over a weekend, but that doesn't happen anymore.
No, that doesn't happen anymore.
And what about what would you say to teachers who are struggling with kind of sticking to that deadline of marking, and if they're starting to feel under the pump, would you suggest them to talk to their head teacher or to their deputy about sending it?
Ask for help. 100%. There's always someone there to support you. You're not alone in this. So ask for direction, ask for help, especially if you're like a newbie who doesn't have that experience. It's okay to ask for help. And even if you're an experienced teacher and you're just struggling to smash it out, it's okay to ask for help.
And I think I think I've said this recently, that we're very guarded. We often feel that, not a failure, but I haven't met that deadline, or it's looming if I don't get this done, and then we kind of get stressed about it. But what's the worst case scenario? HSC results aren't due. Like if it was a trial, we have a bit of a deadline for the trial, then to get HSC marks in. But if you can say to your deputy or your head teacher, hey, I just need three extra days, I need some extra time, or give me some release time at school to get this marking done. If you have a big cohort, certainly, I know that was the case for me. Working in, a senior school, we had 5 classes, and there was no way that I could finish my marking in the allocated time. We had to, possibly negotiate. Can we just, make it due an extra day late? Typically we had 2-week turnaround. Is that something that you have at your school? A 2-week turnaround? Yeah.
Just depends on what it is and what's happening.
Nice. All right. So what's your tip number 3 for becoming a marking ninja?
Yep, it is, have they addressed the verb? It's so important. So, you can learn all the content, and you can know, your syllabus inside out, and you can rattle off everything from the textbook. But if you can't apply that knowledge, and if you can't address that verb, then you're not actually answering the student's not answering the question properly. And when you're marking, so as a teacher who's marking that, you really need to make sure that your student has addressed that key verb, because that is going to be the difference between your band 4s, 5s, and 6s. So students really need guidance and feedback around that. So what does a describe look like? Are they identifying characteristics and features, or are they just kind of rattling off your definition? With an analysis question, are they identifying the components and the relationships between them, or are they just really describing it and going through all the stuff? You really need to make sure that the students are hitting those verbs, especially the higher order verbs, to make sure that they are showing that they have that extensive knowledge. They are showing that they have that skills of applying their knowledge.
Yeah, that's really important. I think many of our listeners and teachers inside the Learning Network would know that I've spoken about this a lot, but I still feel obliged that, we need to really push this. And I'm really glad that you said that was your third tip, because gone are the days that we can teach our kids the content and then expect them to know and then to be able to just regurgitate it on a piece of paper. They need to be able to apply these glossary of keywords in lots of different circumstances. And as you mentioned, each of the glossary of keywords have a different function. The verbs are a doing word, like they have a different function for each of the words. And I think a lot of our teachers might still be stuck on some of them. Like they might our kids are still like explaining a lot. They're doing lots of explaining, but they're not actually addressing, like you said, those higher order verbs, which will essentially kind of get them those higher marks. 8 marker is our top in our short answer. 15 is our top for our option. And those higher verbs tend to be more difficult, obviously, but our kids are sometimes not nailing them. And that's why our results are maybe not how they are, because they're not nailing that verb. You could have the best answer in the world, but if you don't do what the actual verb tells you to do, you're not going to get, those band 4, 5s and 6s that we want to see. And I'm pretty sure that all of us want to get our kids past that. I reckon about a 4 out of 8. So if they've kind of just have content, it's about a 4. They start building on that a bit more, they start to get into the 6, 7, 8, that they've got all those little bits together. They really make a good response. And I think, look, there's lots of things that we can do to help build on those words. What were some of the things that you might have done in your classroom at the moment?
The biggest thing is to use alarm.
Yeah, okay.
If you're not across alarm already, definitely get onto that, because it really breaks down each of the key verbs, and it really explains and shows the kids clearly what they need to do to get up to that next step. So if you're not implementing that in your classroom, that'd be my biggest tip, is make sure that you're nailing alarm in your classroom and the kids have it. So I'm just in the process, actually, probably should have done this already, but anyway, of just printing them out, and I'm actually laminating them so the kids can bring them around to all the classes. They can whip it out when they need to. And, it's not that the key verbs aren't just for CAFS, they're for every subject. So I'm just getting them laminated at the moment. So they can just get it out at any of their classes and have a look and go, okay, so analyze, describe, explain, what is it that I need to do for each one of those steps, and they can build on that in order to make sure that they're nailing that key verb and they're answering the question correctly.
Yeah, that's great.
As much as possible.
Yeah, cool, awesome, thank you. All right, what about number 4? Tip number 4.
Number 4 is about global marking. So make sure that you are reading the whole response, and when you're reading it, is it extensive? Is it thorough? Is it sound? In your gut which mark range it should be in. So if we're looking at part C, for example, where you've got the 15 marker and you've got extensive, thorough, sound, it's really important that when you're reading through, you're looking at the whole response. And it's not about ticking things off. Have they looked at the 5 dot points under that dot point? Have they looked at the 5 subheadings and addressed all of those? It's not about that. It's looking at the whole response. So what is it that they're writing? Are they using examples to show that they understand? Have they addressed that key verb? So, and don't mark them down for what they've done wrong. So when they've written something that may not be right, you don't go, oh, well, clearly that means that they can't have that thorough knowledge because they've made a mistake. That's okay that they've made a mistake. So which brings me on to my number 5. So in feedback, you give them the feedback that section that they've written or what they've written is incorrect, but you look at what they have done correctly, and that's what you need to build on.
Yeah, so with your feedback, do you kind of go, I know a lot of teachers kind of go, they get their red pen out and go wrong, wrong, wrong. What do you, when you say that you give them feedback on what they've done well, what's the purpose of doing that, like with the kids?
I think it's really important that they know what they have done correctly. So you can identify what you've done wrong, but if you don't know how to fix it, what's the point? Right? So it's, like in maths, if you tell them that, 2 + 2 is 3, but don't explain how you actually get to the 4, then what's the point of putting it across? And I never mark in red pen either. I can't ever bring myself to mark in red pen. I actually mark in purple. So a lot of people mark in green, but yeah, I mark in purple. And So when I identify what they've done right, so I tell them like, this is good. And then what could you do to improve it here? So I'll say, you know, perhaps you could have given a better example or explained the example better, or also the way they've written is important as well. So are they using that pure paragraph structure that shows that it's clear and cohesive? What's missing from your pure paragraph structure? Have they provided enough evidence? So they're making a statement, so they're claiming something, but do they have the evidence to support what they're actually saying? And I find that that's usually what I'm providing the most feedback on, is where is your evidence and where's your example to back up that?
Yeah, because those examples really, before we started recording, we spoke about the examples of being a way that the kids kind of prove that they actually know their stuff. Here is I'm demonstrating that I know my stuff because I'm able to give you an example that lets me shine, lets me kind of explore what I've learned, rather than just, here's my content, here's regurgitating from the syllabus or from the textbook. They can then draw on an example from whatever they've learned, you know, hopefully a new example or something that's quite different, explicit, unique, and then bring that example and bring that to life through that that evidence or that example part.
And varied examples are important too, because varied examples shows that they really do have that understanding of the dot point of what the question's asking. So, and that then goes into, you know, the difference between is it thorough or is it extensive?
Yeah, and I think when we go back to our performance band descriptors, which are kind of they're guiding us in terms of our band, so the description that would and the characteristics of each of those bands, and this is exactly, you know, for CAFS especially, that they can apply their understanding in a number of different contexts. So I think that's a common misconception, you know, across all HSC courses, that they really know their stuff, but they need to know their stuff in a number of different ways, like for the option, for parenting and caring, for groups in context, for research, not just, you know, in one or two areas. They actually need to sustain that understanding all the way through, and it has to be through that application. That's the best way. And I think I love that our course has gone away from that that regurgitation of information, or here's to learn about, here's to learn to, here's a HSC question. It's really gone away from that and got our kids to really think bigger picture, to think broader, because essentially we don't want to just assess them on the syllabus or on what's in the textbook. We want to be able to assess the kids on what they know.
Everything we know, that's right.
Yeah. So anything else that you need to say to wrap up about becoming a marking ninja for our listeners?
The more guidance you can get in your marking, the more beneficial it is for you. And Kelly's course is super helpful. So it really is a good simulation of what it is like to do marking. You get really good understanding of what all the key things that you're looking for. So we've gone through like 5 of them, but there's so many more. There is. And just creating those networks to be able to build that, so to build that knowledge, and, you know, to ask. So, you know, don't just feel like you're marking in isolation either. So it's okay to have a buddy. So if you're the only CAFS teacher in your school, it's okay to have a buddy at another school that you can bounce ideas off. And I guess you know, your course really builds on that network, as well as giving all the skills that you need to be able to really successfully give the right feedback and mark your students in the right ways, in order to, you know, bump up those 3 to 4s, and there's 4 to 5, so that you know exactly what it is that you're looking for to move them up to that next band or that next mark range in that particular question. Yeah,
and Bel has just introduced our marking experience in CAFS course. So last year we ran it twice. I'm like the MC, I'm the facilitator of the day, and we have 3 highly experienced CAFS teachers presenting on those days, and Bel is one of them. Feel very privileged to have her and her expertise with, you know, with everything that she's covered in CAFS. But it is a whole day of marking, and you get to feel and experience what it's like to actually do HSC marking. So we know that HSC marking for many centres now, it is on the screen. So our marking experience in CAFS course is actually on screen rather than pen to paper like we would in class. It is on screen, so it simulates the actual thing of what it actually looks like for HSC marking. I think You know, if there was something like this for me, you know, when I first started teaching CAFS, I don't know, I think it would have made a huge difference to my CAFS journey in the early days.
I would have been a much better teacher earlier on had there been something like this then.
Yeah, and I think, you know, look, last year it was amazing to have 30 teachers from all parts of New South Wales. Doesn't matter where you are, you know, your experience. If you're a newbie, I think the newer you are, we want to kind of have you come in, because you don't then create some bad habits in your marking. You kind of know straight away, this is the standard, this is the expectation of what it really looks like to mark in community family studies, because there are lots of myths and misconceptions about our course. It's really easy, and we know that it's not easy to get really good results. So marking experience in CAFS will happen term 2 week 2 and term 3 week 2 on the Thursday, and we have 5 hours together. And I think it's not just about that experience of marking, but also, as Bel said, you know, the power of sharing ideas, the power of listening to other people. And I think from last year, did you get that vibe, Bel, that the teachers were also just pumped up? They can actually could ask each other questions?
Oh, it was great. So yeah, no, just the camaraderie between everybody, and just, you know, the support that people provided each other was just so valuable. And it's just nice to know that, you know, there are other people out there that are feeling overwhelmed with the marking as well. It's not just you, and that there are people out there to support you.
Yeah, good point. All right, well, on that note, thank you so much for joining us on our podcast episode. And if thank you. If people want to join Marking Experience in CAFS, you can head over to thelearnet.com/marking CAFS and read all about it. But like we said, not just about the actual experience of what it's like to do HSC marking, but also join other CAFS teachers who are literally in your shoes, been there, done that, but also for us to be able to connect and learn together. So thanks heaps, Bel.
Pleasure.